The article we chose was Caffeine Improving Basketball Performance in Experienced Basketball Players. Caffeine is known as an ergogenic aid to sports and to physical performance. It's also known to rapidly absorb in the body after ingestion. The purpose of this article was to determine the effectiveness of caffeine to improve overall performance in the experienced basketball players. They hypothesized that pre-exercise ingestion would increase performance in basketball-specific tests, but it would not affect the game-related statistics.
For the participants of this study, 20 well-trained, experienced basketball players from 2 different basketball teams volunteered to participate. The sample included 10 professional female basketball players around the average age of 28 and 10 semi-pro male basketball players around the average age of 27. This allowed application of outcomes to both sexes, and all participants had a minimum of 10 years experience. They all trained for approximately 2 hours per day, 5 days per week, including a weekly game, and there were no medications that the players were on at all. Pre-experimental procedures. Each participant underwent a physical examination to ensure good health. They also nude-weighed each participant to individualize caffeine doses. Each participant's body fat was calculated from 6 skin fold measurements from equations by Carter, and each participant's body muscle was calculated by subtracting fat mass, bone mass, and residual mass from total body mass. They encouraged participants to abstain from ingestion of caffeine in the form of coffee, cola, and energy drinks during investigation. The day before each trial, they refrained from strenuous exercise, and each participant ate their regular pre-competition meal at least 3 hours before the onset of trials. Statistical analysis. Both male and female basketball players were treated as a single group in the statistical analysis because no sex interactions had previously been found in the use of caffeine with the exercise. The data analysis was performed using SPSS V20 software. The Shapiro-Wilk test was used to test the normality of each variable. The student's t-test for dependent variables was used to establish the differences in the variables normally distributed between the caffeine and placebo. The two-way analysis of variance was used to determine differences between treatments for the Abalikov jumps, the Kodat test, and for the different accelerometries. The McNamara test was used to deter differences in the frequencies of side effects reported after the ingestion of each treatment, and the magnitude of Cohen's effect size was calculated and interpreted.
To sum up the article, there were 20 basketball players recruited for the study, and 10 consisted of females and 10 were males. These basketball players were skilled players that they recruited. The study was a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized experimental study, so that means that both sides had no idea who was getting the placebo and who was getting the caffeine in this case, and neither did the instructors or the people that were over the study. The investigation was split up into 2 weeks, but those 2 weeks were separated by a 1-week period. The purpose of the study was to find out what effect caffeine ingestion had on overall basketball performance in experienced players. The players had certain times that they could ingest the workout or pre-testing meal, and also the ingestion of caffeine was on a lot of time before was an hour before they were tested in the different areas. The players were tested in the Abalikov jump, the Kodat, which is the change of direction and acceleration time, and 2 free throws were also tested in addition to the 20-minute stimulated basketball game. The investigators found that when experienced players ingested caffeine, that their overall basketball performance was increased. And to summarize up the effects that caffeine had, since they were taken in the later part of the day, caffeine increased sleep disturbances, so they were having more episodes of insomnia where they would wake up in the middle of the night, their sleep schedule was disturbed, and that sorts of things. And like I said, it also increased their basketball performance, which was a good thing. I guess that's kind of what they were wanting to find.
Presenting the findings. So, compared to the placebo, the ingestion of caffeine increased the mean jump height reached during the 10 reps of the Avalokov test from 37.3 to 38.2 centimeters. It, however, did not change the mean time that it took during the Kodak test, which is change of direction and acceleration test, with the ball or without the ball. And also compared to the placebo, ingesting caffeine did not modify the number of free throws made at the end of each rep of the Kodak test. The notational analysis of the simulated basketball game showed that ingesting caffeine did significantly increase the total number of impacts per minute of the gameplay. So it went from 396 impacts per minute up to 410 impacts per minute. However, caffeine did not affect the mean heart rate of the players or the maximal heart rate of the players. Compared to the placebo, the pre-exercise ingestion of caffeine significantly increased the number of free throws that were attempted and made, the number of offensive and total rebounds, and the number of assists. Ingesting the caffeine also increased the performance index rating, as well as increased the self-perceived muscle power during the test. However, there was no significant difference found for self-reported fatigue or for the endurance perception. We also found that during the 24 hours following the test, players who had ingested caffeine showed significantly higher prevalence of insomnia, jumping from 19% up to 54.4%. The remaining side effects were similar between both experimental trials, and those were nervousness, irritability, activeness, gastrointestinal discomforts, headache, and muscle pain.
It was found that there was a higher perceived muscle power while testing and a tendency for a higher perceived endurance capacity. Caffeine also did not modify accuracy on 2 and 3-point goals and free throws. The study also supported other previous studies on the improvements on jump heights due to caffeine ingestion. It can't be concluded that caffeine was effective in increasing sprint performance. Overall, the hypothesis was supported. According to the conclusion, it states that caffeine does improve physical performance in areas such as the Avalokov jump height, the amount of body impacts, number of free throws made and attempted, offensive and total rebounds, and the total number of assists. With this finding, it also allows for us to use caffeine in regulated amounts before games. The regulation is needed so the athlete does not become caffeine dependent, and so habituation, which is also tolerance, does not occur.
Limitations. The mock game was played without substitutes to obtain similar playing times among players and between experiment trials, so the playing times and the physical demands in the present investigation were probably higher than during an official basketball game. All of the data was presented as a group mean, so caffeine may not exert ergogenic properties for all athletes, so it is necessary to identify caffeine non-responders.
Some recommendations for the study is to further investigate if caffeine has a role in enhancing teamwork and physical performance in making better on-court decisions.